about the Brothers Grimm. So, a lot of people know a lot of these stories, seen the movies, popular Cinderella, Tangled. But let's talk about who wrote them. Some of the first stories, earliest versions of these stories. And I want to focus specifically on Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. And I'm going to talk about two stories of theirs. But I think it's important to start with their family. So there was 5 total brothers and they had 1 sister. They lived in Halle, Germany, which is right here on this Google map. It's like right in the triangle of Berlin and Munich. Their father was Philip Wilhelm Grimm. He was a lawyer. And he died in 1796. And their mother, Dorothea, there's not much information on her because of the time period. Women were very, you're with your husband. But she died in 1808. And this is all from Britannica. A little bit about Jacob. He was the oldest sibling. He was born January 4th, 1785. And he was 23 when his mom died. And so he had to help take care of his siblings, which Wilhelm eventually took over so he could study law. And he pursued law and traveled around until 1816. And he never got married. The next brother was Wilhelm Grimm. He was born February 24th, 1786, so his birthday would have been about a week and a half ago. He also studied law. They both followed in their father's footsteps for a while. Kind of figured out it wasn't for them. So he worked as a secretary in the library until 1814, and then when Jacob moved back home, around 1816, they focused on literary research. And he did marry a woman with the same name as his mother, named Dorothea, and they had 4 children together. According to Princeton Press, come 1812 and 1815, they had 2 volumes published of stories. In total, there was 156 of them. Some of these stories are literally a page and a half. They are all very, very short. But this is a quote from Krista Kaninsky, who said, "The Brothers Grimm were indeed loyal to the oral tradition as far as their linguistic research project was concerned, which was their initial intention of motivation in collecting these stories." Let's focus on collecting. These were stories passed down through generations. A lot of these, they did change quite a bit, but they all have so many different versions. This is a photo of what would have been the cover, most likely, because of the time period, there wasn't photos, so we really can't know. But I wanted to, hopefully very quickly, because I nerd out about this, talk a little bit about 2 of the stories they wrote. Let's start with a common one that everyone knows, which is Cinderella. It starts out, same as the Disney version. A lot of the Disney versions were based on the Brothers Grimm versions. But rather than her mom having no part in the story and just dying at the beginning, her mother actually has a very large part. So her mom dies at the beginning, however, gives her this message of be good. Be poised and be good. And that's kind of like a moral throughout the whole story. And so every day she goes to her mother's grave and cries 3 times a day. It's very sad. And after a while, her father goes on a trip, she tells him, back up, forget the details. He gets remarried like a month after her mom dies. Has 2 stepsisters, same as the Disney version. And he's going on this work trip and it's like, okay girls, what do you want? And both the stepsisters are like, I want dresses, I want jewels. But she's like, I want the first branch that hits your head. Brings that branch back. Because in this version, he does not die. Kind of a butthole though. But, where was I? She ends up going to her mother's grave and planting this tree branch. And she's there so much that this grows into a huge tree. And there's always a bird there. So they find out about the ball. And there's 3 nights rather than just 1. And so her stepmother, she's like, can I go, begging to go. And she's like, if you pick all of these seeds out of the fireplace, you can go. So with help of birds, she does this. And so she runs to her mother's grave, because the stepmother's like, no, you don't even have a dress. I just made you do that to make you do it. But magic is involved, and so the dresses are given to her each night. The same thing happens all 3 nights, but she dances with the prince, and he only dances with her. And come the end of the story, which is very common, but rather than having the stepsisters try on the shoe and it just doesn't fit, one of them cuts their toes off, tries to slip her on, it fits, so he's like, oh, this is my bride, takes her away. And the birds start singing like, no, look at the foot, you see the blood. And this happens with the next stepsister too, who cuts her heel off. And finally, Cinderella does get to try on the slipper and marries the prince. However, at the wedding, both of the stepsisters are there and get their eyes plucked out by birds. Rapunzel is another one. I'll try to be quick because I nerd so much about this stuff. In this version, she's not a princess. Her family's very poor. And while her mother's pregnant, she gets a craving for the Rapunzel plant. Husband sneaks into the garden, gets caught by Gothel, who is like, fine, you can take the plant. I want your child though. So takes the child, keeps her like in the countryside until she's 12, where she's eventually locked in a tower. And she's there for a couple of years, and every day Gothel comes and is like, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me. So lets her out, and as time goes on, this prince hears her singing one day. And the next day he comes back trying to figure out a way to get into this tower because there's no door. And sees Gothel give the message, so he tries. Lets her up. She's freaked out, of course. And so, but they bond, and they continue this every day until one day Gothel comes up while the prince is not there, and Rapunzel makes a comment of, why are you so much heavier than the prince? Gothel pieces it together pretty much from there. And so cuts Rapunzel's hair, sends her away to the desert, and the prince comes up later that day. She lets the hair down, and he gets up there, sees that it's Gothel, throws himself off the tower, survives though because he landed in rose bushes. So he is blind though. But, so he spends a few years wandering with his horse, only eating berries, and eventually finds Rapunzel, who's given birth to twins, which was a very common occurrence in these fairy tales, and takes her back with him, and they do get married. But why should you care? These stories have had so much influence over pop culture and all kinds of different stories, variations. Pretty much like without these versions, you likely wouldn't have the Disney movies. And if you did, they would be even more different than the original stories than they already are. But a lot of people forget about the authors. That's why I love the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. And so I like looking at like what influenced them, maybe. But without Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, whose passion of literature and collecting these stories, we wouldn't have the stories we have today. Thank you.